Hi, good evening. So I'm gonna run through a range of images. Especially when I was putting this PowerPoint together, I was like, you could just Google and you can find all kinds of works that I already done, and like, how do I talk about those? So I figured I'd take it a step back, even go further to some early works, some works I was doing in undergrad, some works I was doing in graduate school, and then just some in between. Nothing's in necessarily chronological order or maybe factual. It's all fiction. No, I'm kidding. It's all just a composite of my works and just I guess a narrative of a weave I've been. I should put this on. These are some of the works you could just Google and you can find it online. But just a range of works, so you guys get some background. And I figured I'd try to do what I encourage my students is to just put yourself out there and try to fail. Really try to experiment and see how it comes through. So I'll begin. So I grew up in Ochoa. My parents, they migrated from Mexico, and
Cool.
did it work? It didn't work. See, it's already filling. For reals?
Did you volume?
Yeah. Oh, the volume connected? Oh, I see the volume. I don't have the volume connected. My bad. So I grew up in Oceanside. My parents, they grew up in Mexico. They were born in Mexico. They migrated out here. They worked the farms and the fields through Northern California, through Southern California, and ended up.
No, you can play it now. Let's see, is it up on this thing right there?
Yeah. Oops.
Oh wait, go back. Check the volume right there. Oh, it's not letting you do that.
Let me.
'Cause I'm having all the way up down here.
Here, you know what? I got it on my phone too.
Okay.
My bad.
It's all good.
If it plays. So that was. It was supposed to be more smoother transition. So my parents, what they taught me to do is they essentially taught me and my brothers how to work. My dad worked. My dad worked construction. Yeah, that's happened in my yard, in my neighborhood all the time. Right, I was like, so, when they started working in the fields, my mom got my dad out there and got him into construction and said, you're gonna make a living, you're gonna put a house over, our heads, and pretty much, he worked construction. My mom, she just pioneered everything. She figured how to sell tortillas, like how to just be, how to sell door to door. She developed a whole tortilla route, door to door, from the trunk of a car to vehicles, to vans, to a fleet, to a restaurant, and essentially, I grew up with three brothers. Sorry, the fourth one, this is before he was born, so sorry. He makes an appearance later on. So essentially, they had us as kind of like cheap labor. They had us working as kids, as 5-year-olds. So, all this talk of that all these people coming across the border are bad hombres, we're not really bad hombres, maybe, when you start putting statements like that, really affects the social fabric of one's neighborhood, one's society. And maybe if you look at the social fabric, maybe just think about fabric and just think of good hombres, the H is silent, so maybe someone has to let Trump know that the H is silent. Mm-hmm. So thinking of,
Which one are you? Yeah, which one are you?
oh, I'm the one in green, which is actually kind of thematic with another piece later on. Now that I see it. Anyway, so when I first was invited to have my first museum show at Site Santa Fe in 2009, at that time, it was tough. Not a lot of artists of color were getting exhibits and showing, and so for me, the white cube's always been this side of contention. So when I got a chance to have the show, I went back to what I learned as a child, this fighting, pushing, pulling. So, I really want to cut up the museum space and have this tug of war. This piece, it's called "Get Off of Me, I'm Not on You." And anyone that has siblings, get off of me, and you're like, I'm not on you. And there's always this push. So I just thought this piece was fitting. So I walked into the museum, and every site is a negotiation, whether it's public, or if it's a museum space. And the first thing I I always try to ask what the parameters are, what the limits are. And they say, oh yeah, you could build a wall, you could cut a hole in it. And I'm like, well, how many holes? Where can the holes go? And I start to ask all these questions. And they were like, well, if we're gonna cut 99 holes in the floor, then, you know, if you're gonna cut one or two, it's fine. But if you cut like 99 of them, that's a different conversation. And I was like, wait, you could do that? All right. So then, you know, my whole proposal changed. And then I'm like gouging the floor. I'm like coming up with ideas. And eventually I just used their floor. And as you see, I created several installations. It's like you just get the floor, you just pull it up and just walking out and it's coming through. So I would take the rebar and actually would draw with it in space. Drawing's always been a big factor in my work as well, as you can see. So as a kid, I was always drawing. Like those are not even Adidas; they're like 4 stripes. I don't know what they are. I didn't get a chance to Google it, but I'll look for it. I think they're like Sykes or something. You know, I was always drawing as a kid, and I was. You know, you're drawn to whatever's around you in cartoons and comic books, and one thing that I was always into was G.I. Joe, and G.I. Joe. What I particularly was into was the dreadnoughts. You know, I grew up in Ochoa, so there's a big Camp Pendleton there, big Marine base. There's a whole other community and culture outside of Camp Pendleton, but everyone that lives in LA or it's on the news, they see Oceanside, they think of the base. We like didn't really interact with the military, but you know, G.I. Joe was a big influence because it was always present there. But for me, I was drawn to these guys because they kind of look like my dad and his buddies in the construction guards. Like these were the only characters that had denim jeans and work boots, and even their weapons were like you know, power tools that I would see in my dad's truck. So for some reason, I was just drawn to them, and I would actually draw my own dreadnoughts. They're like this fictional biker gang, but for me, like they reminded me like the blokes my dad hung around versus like these Australian blokes. So I started documenting the series of ficus phenomena that was happening throughout the city, where the ficus were uprooting the neighborhoods. Back in 2003, when I was documenting them, it was just throughout the city of LA, a lot of non-affluential neighborhoods. The affluential neighborhoods actually had rubber sidewalks, and they actually would contend with these forms. For me, it drew me back was right in front of our house. We had this happen. A tree uprooted the sidewalk. My dad called the city, and for me, it's like capturing this act of civic failure. The city wouldn't come replace it. They're like, you know, it's on your property. You got to fix it, or you got to like meet them halfway. And you know, he's proud about his house, so he was like, I got to deal with this. So he just called his buddies over one weekend, and you know, they literally like just chopped down the cherry tree. They cut it down. They knew how to do construction. They knew how to like lay concrete. So they just removed all the trees. Paved it all like an 8-foot pad of concrete because then you had a 4-foot sidewalk and another 4 foot. Not good for the environment, but like in hindsight. But we loved it as kids. We could bike ride, we could roller skate, we could whatever. So from there, that you know, I created a series of sculptures and like seeing that act of empowerment, like that subversion. Seeing my dad do that with this construction guys, you know, I was just like, man, I want to be a construction worker. I mean, I guess an artist too, but so these are just works that I referenced. That I would take these found pallets that would look the size of a pallet, size of a sidewalk, 40 by 48 inches. I'll coat them with cement, and then I'd create these man-made tree structures, and they had titles like my dad did it. Actually, I forgot the title so long. Infracted amalgamation, because all these ideas, all these forms are coalescing into one form. The trees. In theory, ficus is always absorbing water, and concrete is always searching for water, and concrete's always absorbing water. And as over time, they start to age and fade out, and they become like one amalgamation. So going back to my dreadnoughts, something else about them that I really dug was they were kind of like these ruffians with like road warrior type, and they had these cool vehicles. And this is more the cooler one, but a lot of them were beat up, and so I'll draw my own beat up. Hoopties and try to put weapons in them. So then I want to create my own work because they're fighting for them. They're fighting the G.I. Joe, but I found myself like you come across fighting all these forms of contention and discrimination, and so I was like, how do I put that into a work? I'm into G.I. Joe, Chocmul, my culture. There's a checkpoint, which if you grew up here in Southern California, you're either crossing the border in San Isidro or you're coming across a checkpoint, and every time you got to cross a checkpoint. You really gotta like make like this gringo face and like so they can let you go by so they don't like stop you. And so you get used to that.
What does that face look like for you?
It's been a while. I got the mustache. It won't work anymore. But but when you're born with it, the mustache you shave it off. So I created this piece that I wanted to do back in 2000. And it took a form of a zine because I as I was in the process of actually figuring out how to make it, 9/11 happened, and back then already, people were on edge. So it was like, dude, if I do anything now at the border, they're gonna like definitely take you out. So this is a chocolate truck. So my idea was to like, because I would have these absurd encounters sometimes. With my parents, we had to deal with it. But when I was coming from school, sometimes I'd come to LA. We literally get stopped by the checkpoint. Me and another friend that went to Otis, and we tell them we're artists, and we're driving my mom's car. It's kind of a big boat, and they'd be like, "Yeah, right." And, one time they actually stopped us and started asking us to recite art history. They had to have us pull out our portfolio, and I was like, "All right, so I'm gonna make the joke out of this." So the idea was Jack in the Trunk. You open the trunk, and a big Jack in the Box, like Jack in the Trunk, will pop out, and I had a whole narrative, whole storyboard how it would unfold. But, didn't happen. So maybe put it back in the back room. So thinking again about vehicles and driving around and my family, it's my uncle and my mom. So again, they sold tortillas. My mom developed this route in the 70s, early 70s, pretty much before there was Mexican markets on any corner. And she developed these roving Mexican markets. And first one pioneered in North County of San Diego. And from there, she'd start, again, like I said, by foot, by trunk of car, got a van, got another uncle involved, got another neighbor involved. Next thing we had 4 or 5 vans. We'd all meet, and that's 5 years old and 6, 7 years old. We'd meet and as a kids and sell tortillas. That's chicharron. If you guys ever eat chicharron, there was like bags of chicharron. They used to buy here in East LA. And there's my pops selling tortillas right there. So they had all these vans, and so when I got a chance to drive, when I finally got to drive, I got me a hand-me-down van. It was an old beige van, beat up, and it was like on its last leg. And I had all this history. I was like, you'd start selling tortillas at 6 a.m. at Saturdays and finish at 9 p.m. at night. Again, probably not legal, but you can scratch that on the recorder. And then when you get tired as a little kid, we'd take a nap on top of the tortillas. They're very warm, because we pack them up. So I wanted to combine that with my art practice. I found myself driving a lot when I was going to grad school, and I wanted to create an artist space. Essentially, again, as an artist of color, like spaces aren't given to us, so we just create our own spaces. Me and my peers, we were just like finding venues, and we'd make it. We'd go to La Fonda here. They had like a side restaurant, and we'd create an art show there when we were in undergrad. We do that at a swap meet. We just try to create our own spaces to have art shows and intervene and really engage with the public. So, I created Class C. That's one of my cousins. So, that's my cousin Jesse. So, I created Class C. It's a mobile artist space. It has a office, gallery, and storage. So, there's the office. I actually would meet with curators. I would call curators and other artists and say, let's talk about a show. I wore multiple hats because the van was on his last leg. I also had to fix, I'm not a great mechanic, but I had to when the radiator was leaking, I had to figure that out. I had to go do the prep walls, got to go find parking, got to install the show. And so we drive around the block. We had blinds, had office chairs, not safe for driving because I changed the screws and the bolts, but storage, every space needs a storage space. I was able to get a grant through UC Irvine, and I was able to soup it up with batteries, a solar panel, and some battery power. So I got to drive anywhere. But also I also carried this double-headed snake extension cord, 100-foot extension cord. You plug it in, and it's live wire. So I get to plug it into my van, and there's a lot of free electricity around the city of LA. You just gotta find it. But you could create a lot of interventions that way. So that would power the van. Of course, you gotta meet code too. So that's inside the gallery, but this unassuming van will pull up, and sometimes people are like, they don't want to get in there. Like it's a van, like it has like this negative connotation of like drive-bys, of kidnappings and surveillance, and I was just trying to exhibit work, invite artists, invite people, and some of the best shows we had was like at a donut shop, at a gas station, outside of a bar. We had some people dancing. They climbed in there, they whacked their heads on the top, and then they just did some good show. They just kept dancing. So I had to get my younger brother now. He's the vanguard. He had his mechanic shirt, so he had to just regulate. Because some people were, putting in some projects that we didn't want them to just damage. But we never had any incident except I think a car crashed into the van once and the work fell off, but it damaged my van more than it damaged the work. So I ran it for 4 years, almost 4 or 5 years, from 2001 to 2005. Had over 75 shows in the van, invited a lot of artists, marginalized artists that are just emerging, curators. Rita Gonzalez, I mentioned, she curated the show, invited her to the show. Ruben Ortiz Torres, he curated the show. This is Kevin Wingate. That's not him, but that's his work, his paintings. They look like computer towers, but he actually was painting these hot rod vans, and Ortiz was like, if they don't succeed here, they're not going to succeed anywhere else because it's in the back of a van. So but a lot of people thought they were computer towers. Jesse Weber, so artists started like just negating the van. They saw it as another form of institution. They were like, I'm not going to show you white space. If you're going to give me a show, I'm going to show outside. So they created these surrogate walls, and so we would drive, and for him, he saw it as he'll take these shapes of these freeway signs, and it'll be like Barnett Newman meets drunken truck driver because they look good from far, but they're far from good because the painting was really bad. Created minimalist sculptures on top, but also that they weren't just objects. I drive around with it, and we actually had someone skating here, so it's not a true half pipe. And that person, he was scared as ass the whole time he was skating. There was like 5 of us around, thinking we could catch him. If he was to fly off, of course that wouldn't have happened, but luckily, knock on wood. I think having neon under your car now is illegal, but back then you could drive with like you're on the clouds. So the artist, this is Halle. This is in Orange County. Albert Lopez, he wanted the idea of pulling, and also the term of Halle, like work and labor. He wanted to be a laborer, and he wanted to pull the van. And so he tried to do like a That's Incredible, like strongman pulls the van across the intersection, hoping the comedian would come and help him. No one came to help him. But he got it across, which is good. So they're all experiments. They're all, of course, that's me and my brother trying the card. Classy. So, continue to drive around. You guys familiar with this? And this was off in San Diego. I think they took these signs down now. They were people crossing. People would come across the border and run across into the freeways. It'd be like, caution, there's people running across the freeway. Try not to hit them, and they got put a little girl in there. So one of my things when I actually went to undergrad, I actually got a BFA in painting, and as I was drawing, I was always interested in being an illustrator, and then eventually a painter. I wanted to be the next Mexican muralist, and this is Siqueiros. And I really love Siqueiros' work. It was really innovative, very powerful. He, out of all the Tres Grandes, the Mexican muralists, he would really push the work and the material. He worked with poly perspective. He would work with like not just fresco, but with cement fresco, and really try to just continue to push them. Use photographs, use projection, spray paint in a way. And so I had a show in my hometown. The Ochoa Museum invited me, so I was like, well, I'm gonna make the show about my experience in Ochoa and thinking of all these experiences. So I created this banner, and it was called "Boil for the Price of the Museum Admission." And so there's these, the running people. So if you guys remember the sign of the people running, so there's another term that's very derogatory. It's called pollos, and people crossing the border, they call them pollos as the coyotes smuggle the pollos, and the border patrol stopped them. So part of it was because pollo for another reason was, and I had me these tickets. So I guess like part of it was because not because my family or myself was illegal, but because 10 years of my life, my mom, she had a restaurant, Carlitos Chicken. I was a pollo for, I was the mascot for like 7 years of my life. I was 10 years. So, that was in '84. I was 10 years old. So imagine like having to wear a chicken suit on the weekends, and when you're not selling tortillas, it was, it was exciting. So, I decided to create this whole installation. So this is me as Chicken Warrior. And that was me like passing the feathers, taking off the riff off Mexican calendars. The chickens kind of looked kind of odd, so sorry. That's probably, yeah, they became these weird bodies, and I don't know. It's probably because my influences are like Garbage Pail Kids as well. Like my first introduction to art history was through Garbage Pail Kids. So you know the works kind of took a play, and you know I also you know my love for painting, and my mom would let me just paint the windows whatever I wanted to, come up with any kinds of things, and you know sopes, you know it was like a life raft with a chicken in a bikini, the chicken's fishing for fish chacos. She introduced carne asada, so you know muy bueno, you know. But I'll just back up real quick to the ticket real quick. So this was part of the admission. So the idea was to get people to transpose the audience from one gallery, from one space to another, from the restaurant, from food culture to the museum. And so for the $5 of admission, you get a free meal at the restaurant, and it was a garito special, which is my favorite. You know, 2 pieces of chicken, rice and beans. If you went to the restaurant and paid for the museo special, you'd get free admission to the museum. Of course, more people went to the restaurant, and my mom lost money. That's it. But you know, I had her sponsor. That was the way of getting mom and pops to sponsor the show when all these big conglomerates were sponsoring all these major shows. Like Target was sponsoring, I think, the Basquiat. So I was like, I'm gonna get a mom and pop to sponsor my show, and it was my mom and pop. So, but okay, back to the. So again, I was like, so this is some work from undergrad coming up. Was you know, really thinking about identity, how one's defined, how one is like what. Like, you know, who are you? How do you develop your identity? And a lot of it was, you know, touching to personal subjectivity, culture. And so I was like, I'm going to create my own culture because I'm going to try to like transcend that because I just want to also make work and really, you know, really expand on that. So I created my own culture. I went green, you know. I became a gringo, not a gringo. So I created this whole mythology for 6 weeks. I lived as a gringo. I was green, my head, my clothes, my skin, everywhere. I went out shopping, I went out, everything I did as a gringo. Sometimes I took off my shirt, I don't know why, but I took off my shirt. Went around the city. The pants are dark green, but you can't tell. You know, I had green cards. You know, I was thinking of Adrian Piper and her business card. You know, you run into people that, you know, pinche gringo, they're like looking at you like, what's going on? So then, but you know, again, this was an undergrad. So I was doing this as I was trying to make my regular work and continue as a develop my practice. And I'd go to family weddings. You know, I went to a birthday party and they're like, what's wrong with you? Like, my family couldn't get it, but they're like, you know, they're okay. You know, let me stay. So as a piece proceeded, even on campus, as an art piece, actually people started getting upset, and they're like, "Why is he still doing this? Why is he still green?" And they started coming up with gringo slurs. I would have posters, you know. They started coming up with gringo like racial slurs, and I was like, "Wow!" Like, and so then I created, you know, a gringo segregation laws because I started feeling this tension from classmates. I don't know, they're just green with jealousy. Sorry, but so you know, I abided by all these rules and regulations, and then in the end, you know, I was trying to figure out. You know, I created this performance, this piece. I didn't know how to end it. I was just like, I can't be green for the rest of my life. You know, I don't know what's going to do to me, like what kind of allergies I'm going to develop later on. But so ended up becoming this March for Green piece. You know, we had the greenhouse in effect, so we had the March for Green piece, and I played off that. And in that, I recruited other fellow gringos and gringas, and some people actually they participated. They were like, you know, I don't have to be fully gringo. I'm half gringo and half Asian. And some people paint themselves like in half, or like in stripes. And I was like, wow, you know. And it became everyone else's performance. But at the same time, as we were marching, I recruited another another group, and it was the rednecks. And the rednecks could be any color, but they could be red. You know, like the ones next to red. And so pretty much there it was. We had this clash that happened on this last day. I was giving this speech in my like green Cal Worthington suit, and that was back in the Color Me Day badge. I don't know why I had a green suit, but that's why. So we had these rednecks and gringos, and I couldn't control the performance anymore. It was a public spectacle, public. I can't even define it. Maybe a historian might be figured out, but it just became this public collision, and they were choking each other. They were fighting. I was like, whoa. So I ended up ending because there was green on green crime, and someone ended up assassinating me as I was finishing my gringo speech. So and then they buried me like to the lawn. So again, I guess thinking about community and community building, I had this one night installation at the space that used to run this alternative space called ESL, Aesthetics as a Second Language, and they were creating these spaces. It was in Washington. It was off Washington Boulevard and La Brea, and I think Washington, or no, I'm sorry, La Brea and somewhere by Hollywood. I forgot the cross street there. But it was a really nice space, really great space. And they would invite artists for one night to create this one-time intervention and or exhibit and what I found when I was there was as an artist, I'm also implicated in what's happening in the space and outside the space. And they had these shows, and it was a really it was a business neighborhood. A lot of family members, a lot of family people lived in the area too. And so whenever they come across, the sidewalk was really small. You know, there's all these artists having an opening, having tecatas, and they're like crowding the sidewalk, and family and people couldn't even cross. They couldn't even get to the next store to get to the business to go shopping and get the groceries. And so then for me, I was like, well, I don't want to like just be part of that problem. I want to figure out how to build community, especially with these businesses. And I'm used to like working with others. So I went around trying to borrow all these ladders, try to see if I could borrow ladders to create my own installation. Try to borrow 13 ladders like for good luck, and I balanced them. And they just rested on each other. You know, some of them gave me their ladder. One carpenter that was in the business a few doors down, he's like, if you lose this, don't come back. I'll find you. He was like, this is my favorite ladder. I had it for like 30 years. This ladder, this pole was actually one of the garment stores. They used it to hook the clothing. That was what they used as a ladder. So I was like, cool. You know, I'll use that. That was a good interpretation of it. So, but all I see was just balance. And so when we had the opening, everyone walked in. And everyone freaked out because they were like all in pockets. Because if you hit one, you can't tell, but they're really close to each other. The space is really small, so it just called on like dominoes. So I found that kind of interesting, like that playoff things. Again, looking at how I didn't do all. I mean, I got a bunch of walls in my work, but I don't know if I don't think I put in a lot of the walls. But yeah, walls have been on everyone's mind these days, huh? So yeah, I was trying to figure out how one is defined in also, just growing up by one's neighborhood, one by geography, and I was looking at these retaining walls, and I mean I already looked at the border, so I was here in LA, so I was looking at how the retaining walls and the freeway system was put in place, and the freeway system itself, you know, I guess supposed to be a freeway, but the last freeway was put in on the 105 freeway. It displaced tons of people in South Central LA or South LA, and here in just East LA and Barrio Heights. That's just an island of freeways, and it just dissects the whole neighborhood. It's called a malfunction junction. It's dissected by the 60, the 710, the 101, the 110, and the 5, and the 10. And you know, a lot of working class live in these areas. The freeways don't normally go through those areas that through the affluent neighborhoods. They go through the mostly working class.
Stop for one. I just want to invite whoever wants to come in and sit down. There's lots of seats in the front row if you'd like to come in and sit down. Seats in the second row.
You have to introduce yourselves.
There's seats everywhere. So please come on in. Come on in. Grab a seat. Sorry.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah. So I was trying to figure out how to create these works, how to like actually remove these walls, how to remove these retaining walls, and I would sketch on these photos, and I got a grant to actually remove the freeway of LA, and of course they would never do it like allow me to because when it calls like major damage and land, the dirt will come down and collapse, and so but I created this conceptual earthwork on paper where I want to wallpaper the city of LA, and so here we are wallpapering the city of LA. I went around the city, took a lot of images of the vegetation, and from a 4x6 photo, when you can still do 1 hour print, you can still do 1 hour now, but mostly that's what it was before. You could go like Fox 1 hour photo and print out your film. I got these images, and then I just started, scanning them in and creating a composite. I created this large composite on the computer. Each strip was 4 feet by 24 feet high, about was it 100 gigs? 1 gig. It killed my computer. Like it was so big, the files. I had to go to a laptop, to desktop. So then I, wallpapered the freeway of LA, and the idea was that as if the section was removed and cars are driving by. Of course, in LA, you're always stuck in traffic, so it doesn't look like you're driving by. It doesn't look like it's missing. So part of it also I had to create was a graffiti abatement plan, because anytime you put any imagery up in LA, any billboard, you got to make sure you have an abatement plan. And I got a grant, so I wasn't asking permission from the city. I was asking permission from the city. I wasn't asking for funding, and so as long as I had an abatement plan, they were okay with it. And you know, it ranged from like, if it had vulgar language, someone tagged vulgar language on it, you had to remove it within 24 hours, 48 hours. But if it was just tagging, you know, you could take 2 to 5 days. And the first time it got bombed on, it took like 21 days. You know, we thought it was gonna get tagged on immediately. It was a whole issue with Caltrans and LAPD. They wanted to use this as a sting operation, and I refused. And so then they're like, well, we want to catch taggers because we know they're going to be here. And I said, that's not the intention of the piece. And so I had to stand my ground. Like, first time as an artist, like, oh man, that's not what the work's about. And so so then they're like, all right, any graffiti, you got 24 hours to remove it all. And this piece is supposed to be for 4 months. I was like, man, I'm gonna call 24 hours for 4 months. So it got tagged on the first time. I don't have a shot of that. And then eventually when they, I went back, I didn't have the funding to reprint the vinyl. So it became this conversation with painting. So I'd go and paint the landscape back in. I'd get my friends and we'd paint the landscape in. And because I did such a good job the first 2 times they got tagged, the next time they're like, all right, you got a week. And within that week, it got like just bombed on and obliterated. And I thought it was cool, but they're just like, you know, if you're part of this problem, we're gonna find out too. Like if I was inciting this. But you know, for me, it's like that's the conversation. That's the dialogue with the community. Like I put this piece up in this public space, and that's the dialogue. I gotta say, you know, it was like almost every 21 days it got hit, and you would think that if they wanted to catch it, they would see the pattern, because they'd come and notify me and say it's been hit again. It got hit at 4:40 a.m., 5:55, and part of it was also because I was I guess a public artist now. I'd also be a victim to crime, to having my work damaged. So I had to sign a form that I'd have to prosecute, or like they had me prosecute if someone was caught. And part of it was, you know, has mixed issues. It really put me in a really, it's kind of contentious. But what they were trying to do is, you know, the last time they did a mural project in the city of LA was in '84 Olympics. They haven't had any murals since then. Now they do little banners because they want to use this as a test piece, as a pilot. I proposed this piece to them, and they're like, we want to bring more art still into the city. But what happens is when they put all these murals up and they get tagged on, one, you know, it was through the city of LA, and then it became a cultural landmark, and so Caltrans now was stuck footing the bill, even though they didn't fund the project. So every year they'd have to do the graffiti abatement plan, and they were okay, you know, trying to address the murals being tagged. But the other issue is the artists would get their piece. Like if you like tagged a little piece, some artists would be like, that this 15-year-old damaged my piece. He owed me $60,000, and so they would like garnish his wages. They'll garnish his parents' wages, probably his grandparents. I don't know. They just went down the line, and so they were trying to find a medium to figure out how we could fund this, how we could keep track of the funding, and really come up with an equal, fair share. Like if someone got tagged, a 16-year-old, 15-year-old, how I wouldn't garnish, you know, infect them for their whole life. So they did. Someone got caught, and they called me up, and I was like, already trying to think, how can I come up with money or a scholarship for art supplies if, you know, they find this person. But luckily, unfortunately, they got them on a larger tagging project, so I escaped that one. Anyways, sorry. But that's a little backdrop of that. So this is extracted. So at the same time, I was creating these sculptures. These forms. And I created this large form. And a lot of these works, when I was doing these, this was just out of grad school. I didn't have a studio. I actually don't have a studio now. I had storage space, which is kind of, and so I would, I'd, you know, borrow friends' backyards, because I'm sure that's a lot of questions, like how do you make work outside? I don't know, still trying to figure it out. But essentially, I would just take good measurements. You measure everything, and then when you build it in 3 different locations, and then when you get it to the space, you hope it all fits and lines up, and sure enough, it did. And so extracted. This is a piece as large. It's 2-ton project. 2-ton weight. So when you walked on the other side, it was completely hollow. Even the dirt was about an 1/8 inch thick. And so this is all built in different spots and then assembled. A version was shown here in LA. Another version was shown in New York. And I had to take the crew and install it. And so it's extracted. Of course, this is my 10-year was it my 10-year challenge? I don't know. I did this is when I first got my gallery show at it's not a real Instagram image, so just to let you know. Can't believe everything on social media. So when I did the if I had a rebar for every time someone tried to mold me, it was the first time I got gallery representation from undergrad to even graduate school. I actually, was trying to get the white cube. I was interested in showing with the space. I was always trying to create these intervention pieces, and and then at some point, I felt the work needed an audience in the gallery space. So I ended up working with Suzanne Vilmater, and this is my first show. I did this piece. I rebarred the entire room, so you couldn't even enter the space. Again, it's not like a color could come and just buy it. I still like dealing with those issues of not trying to be molded by the market and the gallery system. So and in 2017, I created another rendition at Art in Practice. This time it was longer, 30 feet long versus 15 feet. And here's an image of the. So again, pulling into construction, the grid, rebar, and form. I was looking at all these materials and how they address this hidden labor, this social labor, trying to take aspects of the social and really trying to abstract it, but also address these issues of this invisible labor. I would hire my cousins that would work in rebar. They'd show me how to tie rebar, how to bend rebar, and then when I got crazy with the rebar, I had to show them how to get crazier, abstract it, because they're used to building candy canes and Z-bars. This is on the brink of turning. So I'd also look at palettes and these forms and structures. You see them all throughout the city of LA, and these, again, the wall. And then, this one I got through, I got all these palettes through my uncle. And he has a palette yard back in Fontana. And so it was really good because he was excited. Because there's about 200 palettes, and they're about $5 each. And you can resell them. And so, I got the museum to purchase all these palettes. And I spent the weekend with them, laying out the palettes and the form. Literally like a painting, I would choose actual pieces where I would want, can't find the mouse, where I would want certain colors and certain layouts. Spend the time doing that, and then come back the next week and he'd sell those palettes. And I'd be like, what? So I had to reconfigure the whole structure again. And eventually at the end, I couldn't find a home for these. And I'm not interested in having a palette yard in my studio. So the museum gave them back they're like, would your uncle want them back? And he was like, yeah. Gave them back to him, and he sold them again, so he was excited. So for like a year, he wouldn't stop calling me, like, you got another show? You got another show? And people were like, well, maybe you should have just sold it as an Ochoa versus as a palette. I don't know if it had any juice. So with the exhibits, I got a chance to travel. This is my collateral show at the Venice Biennale. This is through the Victor Pinchuk Foundation. The first iteration of the show was in the Ukraine. You got to go out to the Ukraine, and I don't meet too many billionaires, but so when Victor Pinchuk walks into the room, he doesn't just walk into the room. An entourage walks in first, bomb sniffing dogs walk in first, armed guards, and then you meet Victor, and you're like, hey. So then when we go to Venice, and he doesn't have his entourage, you feel kind of like, whoa, what's going to happen? Like, this is where they could take you out, and you don't have a guard with you, so. This is a series of works I did. I had them made this terrazzo. It was actually a grandfather, father, and son. I don't think it's continued after the son. He wasn't too into it. So, but it was like 3 generations of concrete and terrazzo building, Venetian terrazzo. So we made these forms, and I don't know. It's like dramedy. Like all the works, there's drama, but this is like dramedy. Everything went wrong. Every dimension. I thought when you talk to the Italian and they're like to my liaison, he'd say C. I thought it was like yes. That was my interpretation of C. But it's kind of like, oh yeah, sure, we'll get to it. And so everything, we had to cut the piece. It was like we had to cut a foot off to make weight because it'll destroy the palazzo. The Princess of Venice lived on the top floor. Her husband, the Count, would every day say like, I'm going to arrest you. You're going to go to jail if you break our floor because it's a landmark. And so you had all this stress dealing with it. But then, I'm telling my mom, like, hey, I've been in the Whitney, I've been in the Venice Biennale. And she's like, oh, that's nice, mijo. So then when I'm in Venice, and, the piece gets picked up, it actually gets acquired by no other Sir Elton John. And that's when she's like, you made it, mijo, you made Rocky Man, it's good. So and that that's I'd get into the story of that too. But anyways, I could talk about the work. So these were some of these forms. They look like my earlier works of the Get Off Me, I'm Not On You, like these concrete forms. They start to play off the shapes, and this is just raw steel to just rust, and I wasn't painting them. And I had a show at Suzanne, and I actually took the raw steel sculptures, and then on panel, on canvas and linen, I actually rusted canvas and linen. I got metal filaments into the paint, into the acrylic, and ended up resting it to create these installations in the slabs. And so, these are pretty large pieces, and of course, collectors, when they always want to put them outside, and you're like, it's gonna rust, and they're like, okay, I don't want them. So you gotta figure that out. But if you're making work for I guess if you're doing this to make $1, then I don't probably want to go into another business. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, you do it for the love of it. And so when you go back in the studio, So when you go back in the studio, you get your assistants. I gotta carry on tradition, So these are other series of paintings, and this one's called reminds me of my dad's truck, which did. And this is rust on panel. This one's dang, looks like my uncle's van, which kind of did. And then just like my neighbor's car. So a lot of it's I've been pulling from personal subjectivity, experience, and part of it you're just trying to develop your voice. You're doing art. You're working in this field. You want to impact culture. You want to, you definitely want to impact culture, and whether positive or not necessarily negative, but and hopefully in this process you get to travel, develop your voice, meet some good people. I see, make some good friends. I don't see Edgar here, but I threw that in for Edgar. And then I think Peter couldn't make it. But yeah, that's the 11-year challenge, right? That's Corey, Edgar, Daniel Martinez, and that's me, right? I look like a gallerista, huh? This is the Whitney. Peter's owner. He works in the architecture program, and part of you just want to surround yourself with good people as you're doing this work. And so then let's see this, and right? You just want to have good people around you. So. Thank you. Cool. You're welcome. All right,
Open it up for question or comment?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Amelia. Thank you, by the way. Thank you all for. I was trying not to make a tell-all, but in the end, I guess I made a tell-all. It's probably TMI, right? Tell some.
That was wonderful to learn more about your work.
Thank
and
you.
I just have a question about the obvious. It's an obvious question about the shift from like the super personal, family-related performance, which kind of morphs into what some people could view as just completely abstract sculpture and so on. Like, how do you? I mean, obviously, your whole talk was about that in a way, but do you find now that sometimes people just don't know about the whole personal trajectory, and does that bother you, or do you want that to be in there? Obviously, the titles
I think.
kind of bring it in.
Yeah, I think in the titles, I mean, it's okay. I mean, I haven't shown a lot of this work in a while. Some of it, I was like, I had to dig it out. I was like, oh man, what happened to that piece? But I think for me, it's just showing the trajectory, especially a lot of undergrad and graduate students. It's, if you look at my work now, it's like, how does one get to that level, or even any other artist's work? How do they get to that? How do they get to that point? And for me, I couldn't find my high school stuff because I got images of me being handcuffed by the border. I don't know, charcoal still life, but I couldn't find those works or my customized lowrider toilet. But I'll try to find those later on. It was more showing the trajectory of I still find a common thread in a lot of these works in the earlier works, and they probably come out more so in the titles now as I just continue to distill the ideas, the works, and really trying to figure out how to still talk about identity, subjectivity, but not necessarily in a really direct manner through ethnicity.
So kind of packed in there some oblique way, or
yeah, and I think it opens it up to about class because when I start doing these large installations, like when I start doing something like this in the Ukraine or even in the East Coast, oops, sorry, that's on a, it's on a loop thing. Sorry. When I started doing those works, I started getting really good engagement. Just direct engagement with the audience coming by, whether they're workers. Because sometimes I don't necessarily hire art installers. I gotta hire other preparators, other construction workers, and we're gonna have that conversation. And I had to like learn that language because that's the material I want to use and utilize. So it ends up being it's become the conversation. Sorry, I keep going to that because it's on a. Okay, yeah, it's on a loop.
Let's see, the personal keeps wanting to assert
Right.
itself.
I mean, I think probably when I first was doing work, I think as long as my family could get it and understand,
Yeah.
then I'd be like, all right, I did it. It works. But as you continue to evolve as an artist, as a person, you're pushing the material. You start, taking these little bits and really stretching those things out, stretching those forms. When I did the van, my mom was like, now you got a place to live, because she was, you're gonna be an artist. Like I don't know what's gonna happen, but I was like, no, this is my show. The van's still parked with my parents, so
Whatever happened to the van?
it's parked with my parents.
It is?
It's parked there. I've had different ideas to bring it out, to do something, to crush it into a cube, like the white cube, crush it into a cube. My latest thing I was telling the student was because we used to fill it up with tortillas, to cast bronze tortillas and load it into the van. So there's still ideas of working with it, or doing something with it. My mom keeps saying, "He really needs a car," And I'm like, "No, man." Yes. Sorry.
Part of Amelia's question struck me that some people would find some of those works completely abstract. And I'm realizing as you said that I'm not one of those people. Do you consider, what's your relationship to abstraction? Do you consider some of those sculptures abstract?
I think they're still. You mean the latest works? I guess my last 10 years or stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. For me, they do what you do with materials when you do construction. They're there. If I could pause it, I'd pause it. But sorry, I just let it loop in the back. It's a galvanized pole. It's a fence post. I just take it and draw with it. I guess that in that sense, it abstracts from what its utilitarian purpose. But it's concrete footing. But I suspend them in the air. I raise them. I compact dirt to make it look like towers. It's the direct material. So there is some abstraction, but there's some distill. It's just playing with the material. And when I sometimes do have to hire possibly some guys to help me. Sometimes I got to go to different places to hire guys that have construction background. They're always like, "You're doing it wrong." So for them, I guess maybe it's abstract for them in some ways because it's not the way it's done, and I got to convince them. I got to kind of untrain them, kind of just myself. Like I have to untrain myself and just using basic materials for art making. When I do drawing now, I use rust. I use rebar. I pound rebar into paper that creates a rust pattern. I draw with duct tape and dirt, and like dirt's a pigment. Michelangelo was using it, but I get it and I put it in my drawings because it's considered a pigment. I know, looks like flesh. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but
I think so, but it made me think more, but maybe I'll get back to you.
word. Thank you. No, I'm kidding. Any
No,
other
but
questions?
Okay, I think what it made me think was that maybe sometimes the way that I'm seeing them is that the material is representational, but of itself in
Right.
a way. I don't know if that
I
makes
guess
sense.
the way I look at it is I'm abstracting the social aspects of it,
Yeah.
and I'm pulling that
Yeah.
out, and those ideas and notions I'm abstracting. But you see a palette, it's a palette. Unless I take the palette and when I cast it in cement, it's a cement palette. When I take rebar and cast it in porcelain, that's another filter. But a palette's a palette, rebar is rebar. It's just built in. I just
Maybe it's just the semantics of abstraction and formalism and how you're.
How I'm thinking of it. Yeah. Yeah.
cool. Sure.
We both just said go ahead at the same time.
Someone in the middle. We'll get someone in the middle.
It does strike me, just Amelia's question, and I'm just thinking about when artists do make work from a certain place, and then was there the first time you can remember that someone, because it happened to me, that someone said, oh, do you want to make this work? And kind of give you sort of a prompt to make it something outside of what you would have usually been working from. Like, was there a point that you remember that specifically?
I think when I did Extracted, which was and it wasn't necessarily like do you want to make this? It was what's that? Sorry. I was given a space, and I already was as I was doing the van and doing the window painting.
Yeah.
I was already taking images of the freeway as well. So your practice. I wasn't just on like here. It's presented as like this is probably one idea. This is another idea. I was working on multiple ideas on different levels at different times. And then when I was given a solo show, I went through like, am I gonna do the chicken costume, or am I gonna do the ficus tree? I started looking at what, and then so that was probably my first large major show here in LA when I did Extracted, and I got a whole space, and I wasn't interested in filling this space, but I want to create this disruption. I want to, because again, as me entering into the gallery space, the white cube, and just as geography has been defining, and also it could be like civic engineering could be discriminatory. For me, the white cube also represented that too, and I was like, how do I address that? How do I, instead of taking photos of walls and creating this gesture of a wall or this intrusion, I want to create an actual intrusion, and I want it to be the size of the wall, the size of dirt and grain, and have that in space. Does that help? But it wasn't like, oh, do this. Like, usually they're like, when I do something like this, I go into another site visit, and they're like, you got a bigger space, and I'm like, oh, damn. So you got to like figure out what to do with that space, and how to address those issues. And it's happened a few times. Like I'm getting a larger space, and I'm like, I kind of want to just go to do Flemish painting or something, like get a little closet and do small works.
Yeah, I hope you never put the van. I've been noticing now that so many, because recently Jonas Mekas died last week, and he was one of the founders of the Anthology Film Archives, and he was quoted as saying, MoMA and all these other museums wanted to take it on, but he insisted, no, they always had to be on their own outside of the institution, whether that was good or not. I thought it was interesting because you see this trend now with these museums taking sort of alternative spaces in under their wing and under their, I mean, they fund them under their auspices, but I thought it was interesting to see someone who refused that.
Yeah, actually, that actually upset a lot of curators and institutions, even galleries. They actually wanted the van to be an extension of their piece, or satellite of their space. And if they invited me to do a show, I made it clear that either I'm going to either show the van or I'm going to show another project. I don't necessarily. I wasn't the van man. I did make a belt buckle of the van man, and I made a gift shop when I finally. It was in the 2004 California Biennial. Its inclusion into the biennial, I put it on a turntable for 1 week, and it was on a vehicle turntable.
Yeah.
I made and then I made a life-size standee of my brother, so when he wasn't there. But then it only lasted for like a week. Then we drove it throughout the city, throughout Southern California. I had to stay within Southern California, within 100 miles, because that's all my AAA could tow me back. So I always had to stay in San Diego, Inland Empire, or LA. And the idea was back then I also wanted to go across the U.S. and borrow, ask for donations, but not money, but AAA miles. Now I guess you could GoFundMe, but back then we didn't have that. But curators and galleries would want to show their artists in the van, and I would tell them no, and sometimes they'd either put me on the invite or not, or they'll exclude me from the show. But for me, it was autonomous. It had to be its own project, its own mobile space, its own driving its own direction. Yeah.
I guess I was wondering if you could sort of take us through your process a little bit in terms of, sort of how it develops and how you even propose these things to galleries, and just sort of a nuts and bolts kind of thing, like how you adjust, when you have to lock in, what kind of framework do you propose, drawing, do you create a materials budget? I just think it'd be really useful for people that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think it's like, how much you got? No, just kidding.
Yeah,
No.
exactly.
No,
There's that,
I mean,
yeah.
there's, it's, so I was fortunate to get this Creative Capital grant. I got it the same year Edgar got it. I actually that's where I met Edgar at the Creative Capital retreat. And it was a really great retreat. They really pushed on how to empower an artist. They had this bootleg camp of just every minute was accounted for as far as like how to make yourself an empowered artist. And so I came back and I was like, I need a budget for my show. Like, and I need this much budget. Like, they really taught you how to push for that. Because what's the worst thing they could do? A gallery or an institution is just say no. And if you really want to do the show, you do the show, or you figure out how to do the show. It's not always that easy, but just asking them, because they'll just shoot you down, and you could just learn how to let's say like, I'm gonna need funding for maybe framing, like maybe a space to pay framing, and then when the work sells, the money gets recouped. But usually it does. For me, it depends. If it's for me, I'm always interested in the site and how I could explore and engage in the site. So when I go to a space and do a site visit, I start seeing how I can intervene in the space, how I can make it site specific, or even if it's temporary, like I had another phrase, I forgot. It'll come back to me at the end. Site specific, or and so then it becomes a conversation about how to negotiate in the space as an artist with material, then also budget wise, and then you pretty much, a lot of them, if they're inviting you to do an actual project, they're already letting you know, like, you get this room, come up with a project. I just started saying, what can I do? Like, what is it that I can't do? I started asking them. And usually for them, they're like, oh yeah, you can't do this. But then when you start doing it, and they're like, oh no, you really can't do, like, we thought you could do this. Like, there's a lot of, you gotta give yourself a lot of room and leeway for what you really want to do not to actually happen, because sometimes they backpedal on because you want to cut out the floor. Like, if you could cut out a wall, you could patch that up. But if you cut out a floor, that's infrastructure that could damage the floor. You could discover a group of groundhogs. What was it? Prairie dogs in Santa Fe. They were worried about finding prairie dogs. Like in Miami, when I cut the floors, they were worried about me flooding the floor. Water coming out into the space. Even though Wikipedia says you could dig 12 feet deep, you can't. So, and don't believe everything Wikipedia. So for me, so come up with that negotiation. I do a lot of drawings. I do a lot of sketches. I do a lot of. I come up with my own budget. As an artist, you learn that you got to carry yourself as a business in a sense. You have overhead, you have materials, you have assistants. If you get the budget, you can have assistants, or you get family members. But I pay my family members too when they help and they work. I don't pay them in tortillas like my dad used to. But yeah, does it help? But I do a lot of drawings. It is a back and forth conversation, and it's sometimes you like propose this when you really want this or something, or I don't know. It's some people are some curators and some galleries are really good. They're really open for you just rocking. They want the best work in their space. I guess the times I make concessions is when it's issues of safety. Like, if what I'm going to do is not going to be safe and it's going to collapse and hurt someone, then I really start rethinking my piece. If I cut a hole in the ground, it's going to cut their cables and it's going to drop the floor, then yeah, I won't do that. Trying to think, there was another thought. Yeah, that's it. It's out. Cool. Yay. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, thank you.